Islam emerged 1400 years ago in Arabia, and it was the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who would come to be known as the last messenger of a long line of prophets sent by God to humankind. He is respected, honoured and remembered in each of the 5 daily prayers by over 1 billion Muslims across the globe. The Holy Prophet was known as a steadfast, virtuous and trustworthy individual, a respected member of the Meccan community. He was an orphan, losing his father before he was born, and with his mother passing away when he was only 6 years old. His grandfather, Abdul Muttalib, took care of the young orphan, but sadly, it was not long before the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was left without a guardian when his grandfather also died. His kindly uncle Abu Talib took charge of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and raised him until his own death. Before he received the first revelations of the Quran, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, would retire to a cave situated on Mount Hira, and it was there while meditating that the angel Gabriel appeared to him and instructed him to read. Illiterate, the Holy Prophet responded that he could not read, and so the first passage of the Quran was revealed. The Holy Prophet left the mountain, returned home and confided in his wife Khadija and informed his close friend Abu Bakr. They became the first converts of Islam. Soon, the closest members of his family and inner circle embraced the faith. Initially, the Prophet Muhammad and his close companions met in secret, but later, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, began preaching openly, asking his fellow Meccans to accept Islam and to worship the one true God. However, his efforts were met with derision and scorn. Although primarily a trading hub, the Meccan leaders, the Quraysh, relied upon the 300 or so idols housed in the Kaaba for the riches of the city and for their own wealth. Each year, Mecca received pilgrims from various tribes who would flock there to sacrifice animals, recite poetry, and engage in drinking and singing. Money would change hands, and the desert city became wealthy with the riches that the influx of pilgrims brought with them. The old rites and traditions of the Hajj, the pilgrimage, was lost and forgotten. The pre-Islamic Meccan community was highly stratified. Fealty to one's clan and kinship to one's ancestors was deemed far too important to be abandoned. They were reluctant to do away with the religious practices of their forefathers. At first, the pagan Arabs allowed the Prophet to spread the message of Islam. However, once they realized that some of the Meccans were willingly accepting the message, especially amongst the poor and the slaves, they grew alarmed. The most prominent members of the Quraysh, including the Prophet Muhammad's peace be upon him's other uncle Ammar ibn Hisham, realized that their own power and authority was being undermined. Firstly, they appealed to his ward Abu Talib, offering the Holy Prophet's privilege, riches and power to abandon his religious mission. However, he refused, citing that his mission was far more important than mere worldly rewards. Realizing that the numbers of Muslims within Mecca were growing, the chiefs began openly harassing the Muslims and persecuting them. The increasing oppression eventually led to a full boycott. The Muslims were cast out of the city, had their property confiscated. No Arab could trade with them nor assist them. As the persecution intensified, the Holy Prophet decided to send a group of 80 Muslim men and women and ask them to leave for Abyssinia. It was there they would find safety under the auspices of a just ruler known as the Negus. The plan was devised in secret to avoid detection. It was the year 615, when the small band of Muslims left Mecca to seek refuge in Africa and practice their faith in peace. They travelled along the Red Sea in boats until they reached the shores of Abyssinia. However, on learning this, the Meccan leaders, afraid that the Muslims would carve out their own stronghold in a foreign land and unsettle their own ties and alliances, dispatched their own delegation to Abyssinia, determined to have the Muslims expelled. The Negus granted an audience to the Muslims. The Holy Prophet's, peace be upon him's own cousin, Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, known for his eloquence and wisdom, was nominated to speak on behalf of the Muslims. He related verses of the Quran and the account of Mary, the mother of the Prophet Jesus, peace be upon him. Struck by the similarities between the verses contained in the Quran and his own Christian faith, the Negus refused to hand over the Muslims, and he allowed them to remain and practice their faith free of oppression. At around the same time, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, received a small delegation from the city of Yathrib, now known as Medina. They appealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, to resolve their disputes and bring peace to long years of civil war. The Prophet agreed, and in turn, the chiefs of the city embraced Islam. Muslims left Mecca and migrated to the city of Medina, leaving their homes and their possessions behind. This is known as the Hijrah, the migration. And it is from this time the Muslims date their Islamic calendar. While in Medina, the Holy Prophet and his companions and the new Muslims of the city were free to lay down the first foundations of an Islamic state. Treaties were signed, alliances were made with the neighbouring tribes, and a constitution rectified. Meanwhile, the Holy Prophet and his companions learned that the Quraysh were travelling to Syria with their confiscated possessions. The Prophet, peace be upon him, organised a small force of around 300 Muslims to intercept the caravan at the wells of Badr and retrieve their goods. It was there, at Badr, that the first battle was fought between the pagan Meccans and the Muslims. The Muslims scored an important victory against the Quraysh. Another battle would be fought against the Quraysh near Mount Uhud, outside the city of Medina. Although initially victorious, the Muslims were routed during the closing stages of the battle by Khalid ibn Walid and his cavalry. Khalid would later accept Islam and become one of Islam's most gifted and successful military commanders. Other engagements would be fought against the Quraysh, including the Battle of the Trench, during which the Muslims successfully defended Medina against the invasion force of pagan Arabs. Eventually, Islam spread across Arabia. Other tribes abandoned their pagan ways and entered the folds of Islam. Finally, the Holy Prophet and the Muslims mounted a campaign to enter Mecca with a force of 10,000 Muslim soldiers. Against such overwhelming odds, the Quraysh admitted defeat, and the Prophet, peace be upon him, was granted entry into Mecca with his army. There was no retribution. There was no mass bloodshed. Instead, the Holy Prophet ordered that no one was to be harmed. Even the old enemies of Islam were safe. One by one, the Meccan chiefs accepted Islam. The Prophet, peace be upon him, passed away in 632 to be succeeded by his close friend and confidant Abu Bakr, who became the first Caliph of Islam. The stage had been set for other conflicts between Islam and the other major powers of the region. Thank you for listening. Until next time.